Hi and hello Watch fans, and welcome to another edition of the Real Time Show. Today we are trying something new. Following the debut of our audio article or Audicle series written by our resident provocateur David Vaucher, we have decided to sit down together, David, Alon and I, and discuss the topics that were raised in the Audicle from last week. And we're going to do this regularly, so we're going to be picking to pieces our own work, and hopefully you, our listeners, will feel like you'd like to join the discussion by getting involved in the comments section on IG or messaging us directly via email. David, Alon, welcome to the studio.
It's great to be here.
Hi, Rob. Hi, Dave.
Okay, so David, you're responsible for this. So I'm blaming it on you entirely. I'm going to throw this over to you, and maybe you could give us and our listeners a little bit of background as to why you felt the need to write the article that you did.
Sure. So, I'll start off by saying I haven't said it to either of you, but Resident Provocateur is a fantastic nickname. I'm not sure I'm ever going to get tired of hearing that. And I would say that it's a little bit counter to my nature, but it's also lines up well with what I'm trying to do here. So I would say that if you met me in person, I'm generally pretty easygoing. I mean, there's no reason to antagonize anyone just for the sake of it. I just don't think it's productive. But I think when you're talking about something like the watch hobby, where people have strong opinions, and I think to an extent, a lot of the kind of blogosphere and media sphere tends to sort of, congregate around certain opinions. I'm thinking like, well, why not stir the pot a little bit? And you and Alon were extremely kind in sort of accepting that point of view and that mission. And so that's how I find myself here today. But going back to that particular piece, obviously, the Nautilus 5711 has been a point of discussion for a long time. The Tiffany collaboration is now probably going on about a year, I think. Either of you correct me if I'm wrong. But I just remember having a visceral reaction to this. And that might seem a little bit over the top. But I think when we talk about some of the larger issues that, to me, this watch brings up, it was such a strong reaction that I felt, okay, I need to write about this. And maybe tie this into some of the bigger trends in watches, but also maybe that are going on just generally around the world.
That's awesome, David. And it was provocative for sure. Before we dive in, I was very curious. Did you get any hate feedback after this was published?
So I did. And you know what? It was interesting that you and Rob decided to run with this particular piece because I think the issues are still pertinent, but, the watch is rather old. And so I'm saying this because originally, I sort of took my chances and published this on Reddit, and I don't have an exact breakdown of what the comments were, like relative positive to negative. I would say that the negative comments were strongly so, and they were strongly so in a way that maybe this is something we can also talk about during the show, but it was in a way that kind of didn't sit well with me, and I think they raised the exact issue I was trying to get across, which was, this watch says something about the watch hobby and certain people. And a lot of the response or the negative response I got were like, basically, bro, like, why do you care? Why does this bother you? And I just wasn't really impressed by that because, I mean, we can agree or disagree, but I just felt like this watch was something that had to get a strong reaction either way. And so to hear like, no, this really doesn't care. I don't see why you're so bothered by this. That was strange. So Alon, I did get some negative feedback, but I think the nature of that negative feedback was surprising to me in the nature that it took.
For the record, I want to state that David is the resident provocateur for us, but he's actually a lovely guy.
Thank you.
Very analytical, very intelligent, moderate and modest. And so it's actually ironic that you take on this role within the group because I think Rob deserved that title, but okay.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Dude, you like to stir the pot.
I am the spoon.
Yeah, you love to spoon. I know that from your lovely lady, but all kidding aside. So I actually do not agree with David. So I was a bit reluctant to use this article, the base of it, which was your post on Reddit, which you re-edited a bit, and then we made it the real-time show article, an audio article, the second one, which the first one was awesome. I got great feedback on that. While we're recording this, I only have 24 hours of data a feedback from followers on my socials where I posted the image of Jay-Z wearing this actual watch. And I asked people to vote in the comment sections with thumbs up to flex and thumbs down not to flex. Because I guess that's the red thread in this article, right? Because for you, David, if I understood it correctly, it symbolized the culture of flexing. And
Yes, that's
for
right.
those that don't know this slang, it literally means to show off. It gives you bragging rights, as they say.
That's right.
And I guess that's what you meant. Now, to maybe put on an interviewer role, do you actually hate the color turquoise, the Tiffany blue, which is turquoise, on the watch? Or is it what it embodies?
Ooh, interesting. So I guess you're, spoiler alert to you and Rob. This was actually going to be something I was going to pitch later. Is the prevalence of this Tiffany blue. I think they call it robin egg blue. Actually, is what it's called. But again, correct me if I'm wrong there. I like I like the color. Honestly, I think that I think it's attractive. I have nothing against it, and I think that certain brands' use of iconic colors is just really interesting. I mean, if you look at a certain shade of blue, it's Tiffany. A certain shade of green, it can be Rolex. I went to school in Texas, and a certain shade of orange means the Texas Longhorns, right? The sports team. So I think it's really interesting. It's a nice color. I think it certainly doesn't offend me aesthetically to put it on the dial of a watch. I think and this is something we'll certainly get to. It happens to be a very bright color, right? So this idea was that you would take this very bright color, you would play off this already kind of strong desire for these double signed watches from a brand and then retailed by another, and then making it super limited edition. Just felt like a distillation of all of that. And I think now that you're mentioning it, Alon, when I see that color, yes, it's trendy to have quote unquote Tiffany blue on a watch, but I still go back to that. Like, this is the distillation of that flex culture in the watch industry to me.
It's funny because it's had a weird effect on me because I absolutely love co-signed dials. I love retailer branded editions of anything. I view them as time capsules and these often like strange little curious throwbacks. They're rarer and rarer these days. And to see Patek do it with Tiffany, which I mean, come on, is one of the most prestigious and famous and iconic jewelers in the world, was thrilling to me. And I actually tried to get one of these watches, which was laughable. Yeah, you can both laugh at me if you want. You have a little moment where I had, I don't know, a day or two of futile hope that I might be able to get on a waiting list somewhere. So the closest I came, funnily enough, was actually the Beverly Hills boutique, and I contacted Ariel Adams of A Blog to Watch, my old mentor, and just to inquire, just to see, is there a chance? Do you know anyone there? Can you get my name on the list? He was like, Rob, they're going to be gone before this message even delivers back to you. And I'm like, okay, yeah, fair enough, man. All right, I understand, but
you tried. That's important. You tried.
Well, it's interesting that I tried. It's interesting because I did want to watch, and I didn't look at it initially in the same way as you did, as you expressed eloquently in the article. You made a point, and you've just reiterated here, how it ties together all of those strands of hype culture to basically be the ultimate hype watch. And it is, when you look at it now, it's bloody obvious. I don't know why I didn't see it at the time. Maybe because I was just taken by the product. I was like, oh, cool. A Nautilus that like unites my love of cosine dials with an iconic shade of blue and is available. Okay, obviously that was foolish. But then I saw the limitation and thought, oh dear, this is probably going to be already reserved and maybe not even sold. Actually, it's a thought that dropped into my mind. I was thinking, I wonder if Patek is actually selling these to private customers or whether they're ending up on the wrists of Jay-Z's and the like. Not necessarily via shady back channels, but that would be the final chess move in this hype gambit, I would say. If you released a watch that was limited, but actually wasn't even available and was already like ring-fenced for influencers and superstars, rappers, athletes, you name it, and nobody can actually buy it. What was the retail of this piece? I don't know. 50,000, whatever. How many photos of Jay-Z wearing it on a red carpet is that going to buy you? One, maybe. You get 2 pictures, you get 3, one of him in the park with one of his kids. I mean, that's all you need for the entire project. It's worth it. So I did wonder, I did cross my mind. So I came at it from a perspective of product first, like, wow, I want this watch. I didn't realize that it was the pure embodiment of evil until much later. And then when I read your article, I thought, this says it pretty neatly, pretty nicely. But yeah, and following it, and funnily enough, because I don't regard myself as someone too easily influenced by hype, I have definitely been influenced by this because now I'm after Tiffany blue dials, even when they're not Tiffany blue dials. And I don't know if anyone noticed this, because I put my name down for the Oyster Perpetual 36, the Rolex, in what is now being called Tiffany blue, but was, of course, at the time released as turquoise or light blue. A lot of people, since the release of the Patek, who have had their hands on that 36 OP and taken pictures of it for Instagram especially, have slightly tweaked the color settings so that it looks more like Tiffany blue. Because now, if you picture that OP36 in your head, or the 40 or whatever, you will see in your mind's eye the same color that's on the Nautilus. But in real life, that dial is actually a very pale, like baby blue. It's not robin egg blue. So, yeah, all sorts of nefarious activities are happening as a result of that, but it hasn't actually had much of an effect on me in terms of dissuading me from chasing Tiffany blue dials. But I'll shut up now.
Okay, so why did I choose the picture of Jay-Z wearing it? Because it's actually a natural reasoning for both Tiffany and Patek to give it to him, because he A, owns a lot of Pateks, and B, his wife Beyonce and him are Tiffany ambassadors. Okay, so that's a logical. I considered using LeBron James wearing it, but the allocation, I don't know if they were gifted, by the way, Rob. There was never stated that they were gifted. I think both Alexandre Arnault, so that's the son of the owner of LVMH and therefore the owner of Tiffany since January 21, after they fought in court, and Thierry Stern, the CEO and owner of Patek, they together compiled a list of 170 people who were eligible to buy one. But that's what I understood. Now,
fair enough. I'm not really saying that I think that they gave them to them. I was saying, like, if like that would be the last piece of a master plan, like to create the ultimate hype watch and then to not actually sell it at all. That would be pure evil.
That will be, so they did allocation, and I have to stand correct. It's 169 pieces because the first one was auctioned off, and I think I forgot his name, but it was sold to a power collector from LA. I can Google his name maybe. And he bid a lot because it was for charity, and he said, okay, I wanted to give to charity, but I think they were retailed literally at the RRP of Nautilus's at the end of 21, which was the retail price in US market. And now I'm actually not annoyed by almost anything about this watch. There's only one thing that really annoyed me about talking about flex culture, and it was the LVMH, either organization or the owners, trying to flex. Did you guys notice what they did with the number 1 in the year 2021 printed on the case back on the sapphire glass?
It was LVMH, wasn't it? Like a little just LVMH right now?
Correct. Rob, did you know that?
No, I didn't notice, no.
Okay, so that annoyed me very much because that's flexing. Why is that suddenly relevant? And obviously they did it probably because it's in the same year that Tiffany celebrated its 170th anniversary, and they've been retailing almost from the start Patek Philippe watches, and that's why the Stern family honored the old owners of Tiffany this special collab. And for the record, Tiffany is the only retailer left today that's eligible only in New York and I believe San Francisco. There are 2 boutiques there to print their name themselves on Patek Philippe dials. So that's an old tradition that faded. In the past, all retailers got their name printed on their dials because the retailer was more famous in the local markets than the actual brands. But to squeeze in sneakily LVMH into a number one, for me, that's the wrong type of flexing, which you, David, condemned in your article, actually. And I've said it many times on air. I don't like when watches are commoditized. I think they're pieces of art. Tiffany definitely makes art. Tiffany's out there. I have a lot of respect for Tiffany. Obviously for Patek Philippe. Tiffany has a long heritage in selling watches, making watches. They have their own watches. So this collab was very natural. I got a comment also on my post that this was a sly marketing move and Cherry Stern made a fool out of himself because in the year that he announced no product should be more famous than the brand itself. So he said that Nautilus should never become more famous than the actual brand or any other model in the collection. And he was obviously hinting at Royal Oak of Audemars Piguet. So he calls that a one-man show, basically. And then they announced the Tiffany. So I defended Cherry Stern and Patek Philippe. And I said, guys, most probably this was more than 5 years in the pipeline. Definitely a few years. You can't get a collab off the ground within a year. And this was done before LVMH bought it. But obviously, the Arnauds asked, the moment they bought the watch, hey, there's a collab in the pipeline. Let's change the printing on the back end. And an interesting story is they made one-off perpetual calendar Nautilus with a Tiffany dial, which was gifted either by the sons or by Tiffany or by whomever to Mr. Arnaud, the biggest owner of LVMH. So talking about flex culture. So yeah, those are my quick 2 cents on the topic.
No, y'all bring up a ton of good points here, and I think I want to start with. So, Alon, I think you're our resident sneakerhead. So you're gonna, if you, what's the word? If you correct me and I'm wrong, then this is gonna fall apart. But you mentioned LeBron in the context of the of this Tiffany Nautilus watch. There was a LeBron shoe called the Miami Beach, wasn't there? In kind of the same turquoise blue, wasn't there? Okay, so I'm just thinking aloud here. Like, let's say that and again, like I'm just being hypothetical here, so no one out there start flaming me. But let's assume that Patek was going to be just a little bit like Hublot and start making some limited editions, right? And let's assume that we had a Miami Beach Tiffany, or excuse me, a Miami Beach 5711 that just kind of sort of happened to look like Tiffany blue because that's the color, and then had LeBron James co-sign it. I don't think that would have been as big a deal. I think even if it was limited, I think that this was purposely done to just like crank up the hype on this. And I think that, well, that does actually lead me to my next point, is that I think it's an interesting theory. Let's say that these were just totally allocated and you couldn't buy them. But I don't think people thought of that. And so you had just everyone falling over themselves to try and secure one. And I guess the point I'm getting at in terms of the broader watch industry is that how much digital ink was spilled and time was spilled on something that it's not horologically a very interesting watch. I mean, Rob, you're a resident watchmaker. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a 5711 that's been around for a long time. They just changed the dial color. So think about how much oxygen that sucked out of the room, how much attention that didn't give to a watch that maybe deserved it more because it was more, quote unquote, interesting or a better value or just more available. Because if I can't get the watch realistically, I mean, sure, I'll read about it, but like it's not that interesting. So what watches were released around that time that may have been totally just wiped away by the tidal wave that was this Tiffany watch? And then longer term, does this trend not hurt the hobby because everyone's just chasing the hype thing rather than that next super interesting watch that maybe gets a couple thousand people into the hobby or, pushes the bar forward or something like that, right? So it was just disappointing to see something that, yeah, I guess historically might have been significant, but on the merits, not really so much. And that sort of overshadows some of the enjoyment that other people can get in the hobby, not just the 170 super lucky Patek clients.
I mean, that's an interesting question, but like we always talk, and us three have all mentioned it in different podcasts, different articles, how valuable bringing people into the hobby is. So the question of how many watchers were overawed by the release of this model, and how many other pieces didn't receive the attention they deserve because of it. I'm not sure how heavily that point lands, because if you've got a ton of people from different industries, the fashion industry, sneakerheads, cap collectors, basketball fans, rap music fans, come into the hobby because they've seen this piece as like a flagship, as like a burning beacon in the distance of something they could aspire to, they would probably never have expected to be able to buy it, and probably wouldn't leave the watchmaking journey immediately upon realizing that they couldn't buy it. So maybe these hype pieces, although they're horrible for us who are already here in the industry and already obsessed and actually want to own watches for decent reasons, like, for example, I wanted this because I like cosine dials. I didn't necessarily want it because it was the watch that everybody else wanted. I wanted it initially because I like cosine dials. And if Patek or Rolex or Omega ever released like a Watches of Switzerland or a Mappin and Webb watch, I'd be more inclined to buy it for that reason. Not because anybody else would care, but because this one crossed over so many boundaries, it sort of muddied the waters of who it was for. And it became this massive news item. But ultimately now, are we worse off for it existing? Yes, it leaves a bad taste in our minds, but is the hobby not bigger? Is it not more widely spoken of?
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I want to jump in here because I'm eager to reply to the 3 points David validly made. And I'm with you 100%, Rob. So going back to David, on the first, and it's historically very relevant because to jump back to the LeBron James doing a Miami Heat, turquoise, something cosine, blah, 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 limited. Historically, Patek and all the other Swiss manufacturers made cosine dials. So it's amazing that they honor, till today, Tiffany to still do this. B, because maybe a lot of people don't know, but back in the day, Tiffany was just a jeweler retailer, buying watches, jewelry. The only thing they produced were Tiffany lamps. That's why they're so famous for that. And slowly, they verticalized and became a mono brand. And the only thing they still retail in 2 boutiques in their global network are Patek Philippe watches. So historically, Patek did cosine dials, and whenever there's an anniversary, they'll grant their retailer to make almost anything they wish. Okay? So how can Tiffany not make a watch with a Tiffany dial, blue dial? So that was a logical choice. Cosine, they always do. So that's historically smart. And yeah, 57M was the most wanted. So I understand they went for it. Did they really want to flex? I wanted to give them the benefit of doubt. Writing LVMH in the one really, really put them down a few notches on my scale for doing that in terms of elegance, because LVMH owns many luxury brands, and I personally have never seen them brand LVMH on a collab product. They never mention LVMH on their products, the actual products they produce. So that's why I find it odd. Now, regarding all these collabs that are out there without a good reason or story or historic value, yeah, I find them hype products. So those bother me, and therefore this product doesn't bother me. Now, what you said on the second point, David, about fueling the negative cycle of the haves and the haves not, shall we call it that way, maybe? Not to use the word flexing all the time. That, and you kind of boiled your analogy and your theory to that. I totally agree with that. I don't like it, and it shouldn't be fed. But being out there, this watch being made and out there, and as you said, taking the oxygen out of the room, I think is a good thing. As long we see all these celebrities rocking a mechanical watch instead of a smartwatch or no watch at all, it's a good thing for the watchmaking community in its totality, because we need to keep fueling the knowledge and passion and awareness of watchmaking, because if we don't watch out, and I'm really scared about the coming generations, if they are not educated to read time in an analog way So I call it a round way, not linear, horizontal, digital. The future of wristwatches is doomed to be the same as pocket watches, I think. So I think it's a good thing marketing wise. The more attention, the better.
So, okay, I think those are great points of view, but I'll throw it back to you both. So let's assume that I accept the argument that it's historically significant. It's a just an attractive collab. Did it have to be limited? Right? What would have been the problem with just someone maybe being put on a wait list? Right? I mean, they're not going to churn these out. I understand that, but why did it have to be limited then? On top of all of the other subjects that we just talked about.
I think they have to. I know, Rob, you want to answer, but I'll jump in. I'm too excited. It has to be because it's a one-off thing. You need to manage expectations. It's 170 years, 170 pieces. That's what Patek does. If it's they're a limited number, one time, that's it. You give it to your biggest collectors. That's how Patek works. I mean, it's a known fact you can't buy a Sky Moon Tourbillon if you don't own at least an X amount of Pateks. And if you're known to the Patek family, boutiques, headquarters, whatever, that's how they roll. And then again, what's wrong with that? I mean, give it to those that really appreciate the art, which is the Patek art. I don't think it's snooty. I don't think it's snobbery. And there are not enough Nautilus as it is. So it had to be capped. So I don't think that there is anything wrong with that. Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. You're right that it had to be capped for the reason, maybe the last point you made is the most resonating with me, the fact that there just aren't enough of them in the market anyway, so you couldn't very well create a new and ultra desirable version of it and then make it more available than the standard model. The funniest thing about the point you just raised, and it only came to me as you were talking, is that this reminds me of a conversation I was having with George Bamford earlier today, of all times, focusing on a very different brand indeed. I was talking, as I often do, about L'Aventure, and we were talking about the way that Clement limits his models to 99 pieces maximum per release, and how the one advantage of his sales technique, and that was to offer sales to pre-existing customers, so loyal clients, people he knows actually wear the watch rather than sell them, is that although it boxes out a new audience and in Patek's case prevents people like us from buying the Tiffany Nautilus, it does make sure that they're going to a genuine enthusiasts or at least wearers community. Because one thing we've noticed is that these haven't been popping up on Chrono24 for 5 or 6 million after the amazing performance of the one that went to auction. You'd expect that if they had been bought by people off the street for $52,000 or whatever the retail was, and then they'd seen that auction result go for 6 million, firstly, no one would dare wear it if they were just regular folk. Look, if I pulled my entire collection and sold off most of my watches, I would be able to go down to a store and buy that one watch. But if I bought it for 52,000 because I loved it, and then it turned out that I could actually sell that watch for 5 or 6 million, it would never leave my house. More to the point, I may never leave my house. I'd be too scared to leave it alone. So one thing I would say about the way that Patek obviously controlled the distribution of these pieces, and we assume that they were paid for, that has at least resulted in them staying on the wrists they were intended to land on. So that is interesting, Alon. You're right, and that the limitation plays a factor there because you know that you're selling them to, and this is a horrible thing to say, but from Patek's perspective, it is at least true, the right people.
Yeah, actually, and so lest the audience think that I, just throw these opinions out there and can't change my mind, I would say this is a sign that these discussions are productive, because actually, I have no rebuttal to that. Because if I go back to my last point where I said, just have them uncap it, make them, a certain number, but just uncap it, then I think you would end up in this weird space where there would be enough that they'd end up on the secondary market. Whereas you're right, Rob, I think in this case, the 170 get worn, they don't get flipped. So fine, the greater kind of watch population can't get them, but at least it's quote unquote honest in that respect, where you don't have the secondary market problem. Whereas I could absolutely see that if you had a watch that wasn't limited, it was just sort of
limited production.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, look at the Snoopy. Look at the Omega Snoopy, the 50th anniversary. That's not a limited watch, but it's limited production. And we saw initially when it first came out, the prices skyrocket. And that was a watch that retailed at 9,600 francs, skyrocketing to over 30,000 on the secondary market for a watch that the Swatch Group had guaranteed people would eventually be able to own if they would just be patient. And now the actual sales prices have dropped quite significantly now, down to around 20,000, between, say, 18 and 22,000. You can pick one up on the secondary market because Omega has released a bunch more. And just in case anybody's been reading the forums and seen a note that Omega has ceased production of the Omega Snoopy 50th anniversary, that is actually not true. They are doing their best to produce as many as possible, and they're being shipped out to boutiques now. So we have a real-world example, a very recent contemporaneous example of what would happen had this model been released in the same way. And goodness knows what prices those Nautilus, is that the correct plural? I never know. Nautilus watches would have reached, given the fact that the regular 5711 is not available. You know? Would have been wild. Would have been a bloodbath.
Indeed. And to confirm what you said, I had a meeting with Omega by coincidence this morning. It is 100% confirmed they are not stopping the Snoop. They won't say how long they will continue because they don't know. But there is no intention stopping them.
No, I think, Alon, that's a great point. It is a good data point that they're making them in an unlimited fashion, but it's still not enough to supply the demand that's out there. And I definitely could have seen that happen as I'm just sort of thinking through that scenario with this particular watch. So, it's definitely, look, I'm realistic about this. I know that humans are going to, follow human nature, and at some point everyone wants to show off. So I'm not saying that we should get rid of that, or that even that we can get rid of that in the hobby. I'm not saying that at all. I think it would just be nice if going into 2023 and beyond, we could get back a little more balance in terms of hopefully watch brands maybe not leaning into this hype so much. Hopefully the watch media maybe not encouraging it so much. And we just have a little bit more of a balance between interest in things that are just cool from a pop culture perspective and cool from just a watchmaking technical perspective.
Thank you so much for that, David. I want to thank you so much, A, for becoming a team member, B, for writing these articles, C, for this first recording with the three of us. I want to thank our dear listeners for listening, for commenting, sharing their thoughts. Obviously, Rob, thank you so much for everything and for just being the amazing you. And we'll paint you, and your next gift is going to be a painted Tiffany blue gift. I know you love those colors now. We would love to hear your thoughts, our dear listeners. What did you think of our concept of launching Audicles, so audio articles? This was the second one. Please listen to the first one if you haven't. Should we continue it? We enjoy writing them and recording them. And what did you think of us analyzing the Audicle again? Please send us your thoughts, comments, feedback, and criticism as well. You can reach us by emailing Rob Nuts with his email address, rob@therealtime.show, or on Instagram at robnuds, that's ROBNUDDS. You can either email or DM me, alon@therealtime.show, or on Instagram at alonbenjoseph. And of course, David Vaucher on Instagram at DAVAUCHER. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you, guys.